This is something that is, we call a part of, systematic thinking. We need to understand this a lot further, getting to the aspect of unity. So we're going to move further on in our discussion, and with that, we want to kind of talk about the flags. So, Brother Chase, I know there's been some discussion about the RBG, red, black, and green flag. Why it's something we should not use, and you're on mute before you start talking. Just want to remind you that. Why it's something that should be used, and why we move, and why foundational Black Americans move from that flag to the flag that they use.
Again, foundational Black American, I want to point out, to be specific, is a lineage. So in that lineage, you have many different people with many different ideologies. I'm fine with people using the RBG flag if that's what you choose to wave around in the air. That's perfectly fine. So I want to be real specific. It's a lineage, and in that lineage, you have people. I see people in the comment section saying I'm FBA by definition, but I have a difference of ideology. That's fine. Some people in our community do have a problem with the RBG flag and other things like that. I'm not very familiar with why they have particular problems with the flag necessarily, but we do have an FBA flag as well. So, and that's something that's unique for our culture. And if I could touch on a couple things real quick that I'm seeing, and I want to really get the point across so maybe the elders can hear and understand what a lot of the younger generation is dealing with. If I could, Brother Taki.
Guys, Chase, Bill.
Okay, and number one, we're understanding and seeing this on the Pan-African level, looking at it in 2022 as foundational Black Americans. We understand that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. We have a lot of people, a significant number of people who come over here, and they're Pan-Africanists when it's convenient. They're Pan-Africanists when they're at the border. They're Pan-Africanists when they need something. And then once they get that something, and it's time for us to get something for ourselves, then we're divisive. Then we're agents. Then we're federal Black agents. That's what they say FBA stands for, federal Black agents. These are the types of things that we're seeing. And this is coming from so-called Pan-Africanists. And that's important to understand. There, like I said, there's a CARICOM movement going on about reparations. I have not seen one discussion among people from the diaspora talking about why that's divisive. We got our brothers over in South Africa, the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. These brothers are fighting for reparations against the South African government. Nobody in the diaspora is saying, man, that's kind of divisive, man. Why are y'all doing that? Nobody says that until we do it. And I think a big problem learning from our history is, as foundational Black Americans, we have been way too open with our culture, with our lineage, whether it be music and art forms, whether it be history, politics, anybody can represent us. And because of that, we've got people within our circles who have hatred, who have disdain for us, and work to undermine us at all times. We're seeing this in politics. There was a lieutenant governor out there in Virginia. They're speaking against reparations. We have people on the reparations board speaking against it who are non-FBA descent. This is a major problem. We have to call this type of stuff out. So we are on code with brothers who are on code with us. I really want to state that. I really want to build on that part of the game, because that part is always ignored in the names of Pan-Africanism. We've been made the face of Pan-Africanism. So every time, if we say something, if we do something that's specifically for us, just like everybody else does. If you go to Jamaica right now, they're dealing with politics that are specific for Jamaicans, not specific for Haitians and everybody else, and brothers and sisters in Britain, they're specific for Jamaicans. Politics in Haiti are specific for Haitians. When we talk about politics that are specific for foundational Black Americans, it becomes a worldwide issue amongst the diaspora. And I think that's very unfair. And that's something we're beginning to point out. Also, a lot of people have a beef. They have a problem with a particular foundational Black American, and they like to use him as a proxy. And we see a lot of that in the comment section, the name that kept being brought up. So they use him as a proxy in order to hate all foundational Black Americans. But like we said before, it is a lineage, it is an ethnic group. There are Haitians, and Brother Yataki, you saw this on my page, who have said some horrible things about foundational Black Americans. I would never get out here and say Haitians are a hate group. I've seen some Jamaicans who have said some horrible things about foundational Black Americans. I would never say Jamaicans are a hate group. So don't do that to us as well. So I think that's very important to understand. But going back to the flag, if you could pull up the flag one more time, Brother Taki.
Yes, it's coming up in a second.
Okay.
We're gonna bring it back up. And while it's coming up, I just want to kind of say this, and this is what we started off in this discussion. Kind of want to just go back to that. The purpose of this is to address some of the issues and to outline a pathway, for healing, something that's going to bring us together. And the two elders really spoke to it very eloquently, and talking about the importance of it and just giving historical context of what it looked like for us in just ancient Kemet, people just coming together. So we do understand that there are some problems, but we need to address these problems and figure out a way. We got basically figure out a pathway forward. But here's the flag. Head, Chase.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the flag, the 3 stars that you see at the top, these represent the 3 groups that were all amalgamated together, all combined together in this country. That's the Black Aboriginal people, or as Baba Small says, the Africans who were the first people here. And if you want more evidence or research on that, you can read Dr. David Imhotep's The First Americans Were Africans. Excellent read, excellent book. Lerone Bennett also talks about, again, like Baba said, the red and the black. And I believe that is in his book, The Shaping the Black America. You also have another great book called Before the Mayflower. That also talks about that. Then you have one of the stars in the middle is the star where we talk about the enslaved brothers and sisters who came from the continent of Africa, not just West Africa, but all over Africa. Then the other star is for the travelers and explorers who came here. African people used to vacation here, because if you know anything about the ocean currents, so they work as conveyor belts that swing people from one continent to another. We were traveling back and forth here for thousands of years. A lot of those brothers and sisters get mixed up. This is what some of our Moorish brothers and sisters talk about, being here, being reclassified. Those what the stars represent. The red stripes at the bottom represent the significant rebellions that came to shape America as we know it today, whether it be the Chesapeake Rebellion, whether it be the Seminole Rebellion, which is hidden. So you only see 8 stripes, but it's really 9 behind the fist, because the Seminole Wars represent the hidden rebellion, which Black folks, foundational Black Americans, actually won their freedom, okay, through Jessup's proclamation in 1838. This would give birth to the Emancipation Proclamation later on with Abraham Lincoln. Foundational Black Americans were down in Florida winning their freedom. The white in the background, the blue, the white, and the red color scheme represents a foundational Black American sister by the name of Grace Swisher. Okay, she was instrumental behind the original design of the American flag. We pay homage to that. So, these are some of the things. In 1526 is a date where we acknowledged one of the first rebellions of foundational Black Americans under a man by the name of Lupus Vasquez, I believe his name was, in Georgia, South Carolina area. In 1526, these foundational Black Americans came here in shackles and chains, broke those shackles and chains, and went to go live with the Aboriginal people who were already here. That's in 1526. So I think it's very important to understand, and we're highlighting our history. No different than what Haitians do when they talk about the 1804 revolution. No different than when Jamaicans show pride in Queen Nanny and the Maroons. We're doing the same thing. And I think that's important to understand. And people who are true Pan-Africanists shouldn't have a problem with us doing this. But again, a lot of people, I want to say, are fake Pan-Africanists. And only time they holler Pan-Africanism is when they have something to gain from it. But when it's nothing to gain from it, then all of a sudden we're divisive. And I think that's very disingenuous.
Let me make some comments. No, you're going to let me comment to my young brother now.
Absolutely,
because if you take the wrong posture, and I want you to back up on the posture I'm feeling.
Okay.
If you take the wrong posture, because long before you were born, Foundation Black Americans were fighting for reparations.
Absolutely.
Long before you were born, Foundation Black Americans was trying to find a label to give themselves. I mentioned Queen Mother Moore as one, but it started even before Queen Mother Moore, and long before you you were probably just a baby when COBRA was founded, fighting for reparations and trying to get it to courts. So this is not a new struggle, the reparations struggle, but you're putting it in a context where it should have the kind of legalism, because at the end of the day, this is a legal question, the reparations question, no matter whose court you're going to. And you're not going to define the court that you're going to. You're going to fight to find space in that court that the court will recognize the charges you bring against whomever you bring in the charges against. But just like those who are Pan-Africanists, I would stop using the term the so-called, because then they could refer to you as the so-called Foundation of Black Americans. Don't do that. If you're fighting with your family to erase a contradiction, don't become the contradiction, because that fight will just continue into nowhere. What you've done, I love the explanation of the flag, because I only saw the flag for the first time, like maybe about a month ago, but not knowing where to get an explanation. And that was a beautiful explanation, because that's how flags are born. It is born out of the historical experience of the people who picked that as the banner. And I don't see any contradiction. The only thing you have to struggle for is a greater plebiscite from among the Foundation African American that they accept this as their flag. No small group got a right to impose it on them. And over time, that's a struggle. The red, black, and green was never meant to be the Foundation of Black American flag. It was a flag that represented Pan-Africanism, the total African world. But no one was pushing it except the Foundation of Black Americans. So that's why it became our flag, because we didn't have a flag at that point, right? But the red, black, and green is a universal African flag. That's what Garvey and you and I intended for it to be. And that should be what it still could be, because nobody can change that. You know, and I fought to bring it back alive in the 60s and flew it when no one else was flying it. But the Foundation of Black America have a right to have a flag that reflects their history. Because that's what banners does. It says, this is who I am. And this is a label. A flag is always a label of a people expressing something. But you, as one of the youth leaders, must make sure that you do not become that which you are fighting. That is very important. You understand what you're doing. So the red, black, and green has earned its place in history. Nobody can touch that, you know? But we must understand what its place was. Yes, Foundation of Black American took it because we didn't have nothing else. And if you remember, about 20 years ago, people started painting the red, white, and blue, red, black, and green with all of the stars. That I disagree with. I couldn't get that because it didn't explain anything about me. But I didn't fight against it overtly because we always had this. But the Foundation of Black Americans, as they're defining themselves now as an ethnic nation, which is something I've pushed for years. So if you've listened to me, you've heard it in multiple speeches. But you don't do it. Your critics, if you thought you could do this without critics, you weren't realistic. All right. If you thought you could have done this without misunderstanding, you weren't serious. If you thought you were going to do this without ignorance being a response, then you weren't serious. And you're going to have all of those things. But you must set the example of the ethics and the moral principle for which you stand and for which that flag represents. If you stand in that space, you're always going to win, because your job is to educate those who don't understand what you've just done and what you're doing. Because if they understood, they would not have needed you or any of the other brothers and sisters. So that's your job. It's a big job to go to a blind person and describe something knowing that they're blind. But if you go to a blind person and get angry, knowing that they're blind and can't see what you're describing, then you're as blind as the blind person. You understand what I'm saying? And it's not an easy position to be in when you're the teacher. But that's the position. when you're the one that is making the ethical, moral statement and stance. It's hard. And no one, and I'm sure you've learned in the few years you've been out here, you've made such a big statement with your work, that to do this work is lonely as hell. Okay? It is lonely as hell. But you must stand for the very principles you're trying to articulate in your words and your behavior. When you do that, even the blind will find a way or use the tools you've given them to see what you're trying to say. Because I know what you're saying. You understand? I have this whole thing. I'm not as blind because I got some glasses on. That's going to help me out, right? But you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I'm speaking just to you now as a young soldier that is carrying this banner. You have to understand that you have to be the thing you're trying to tell people you are. And don't let them pull you into the muck and mire of ignorance, of backwardsness. You understand? And if you do that, you'll turn them around to an understanding that you've brought forth a body of knowledge to explain a historical experience and to deal with a contemporary situation that makes sense. But you got to stand your ground ethically, morally, and principally. And if you do that, you're going to be victorious.
I got you, Baba.
Brother KABA, you want to share your thoughts on this?
I think one of the greatest strengths that we bring to panels like this, discussions like this, one of the things that I have found so exciting about knowledge and wisdom is simply, I tell people all the time, I don't want you to believe a word I say. The purpose of what I'm doing is to make you think. And if I can make you think, then I've succeeded in what I wanted to do. In so many ways, we all try, when I say we, I mean this not collectively, but there are those that come before us and become insulted or upset if you challenge what is said. I embrace that. This is supposed to be a growth. You know, there was a time when there was a lot of debates going on. And I often, when I spoke, I would often say that a debate is really the search for ma'at. There are people that have their opinions and they come forward with their opinions. It's up to the audience to analyze, like Dr. Jeffrey say, get the paralysis out the analysis, take the sense out the nonsense, and then take what you've learned to the next level and then to share it. In Western civilization, because of what I consider to be the fragility of the arrogant ignorance of the mutation of intellectual thought, when you disagree with somebody, you automatically become, well, anything by matter of degree, an enemy, you become a combatant. But that's not how I see knowledge and wisdom.